All right, committee, can you confirm to me if you can see the slide?
Yes, we can, Coach.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to quickly deal with the briefing before we start the first parliamentary round. This is pretty much the order of the speaking and also the timing of the speech. Please take note well. If you guys are new to Asian's parliamentary debate, then I highly encourage you to just screenshot this so that you don't mess up and you don't do the wrong speaking order and time. So make sure that the order is as follows, starting from Prime Minister, zigzag turns until the opposition whip, and then it's followed by the opposition's reply before affirmative reply to close the entire debate. The time, the time durations for Prime Minister until opposition whip, each of the speaker has 7 minutes and 20 seconds speech time, and opposition's reply and affirmative reply both has 4 minutes and 20 seconds speaking time. The affirmative teams will have 3 members, and they shall defend the motion. And the 3 members of the team, each of which give a 7 minutes and 20 second speech. They are called Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, Affirmative Whip. One of the speaker from the affirmative team, either the Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister, is charged with giving a 4 minutes and 20 seconds reply speech that clarify the debate from the affirmative perspective without bringing forth new arguments. The same goes to the negative side of the House. The opposition's team should negate the motions and refute arguments brought forth by the affirmative, with the 3 members of the team too, each span 7 minutes and 20 second speech as well. The leader of opposition, deputy leader of opposition, and opposition's whip. And like the affirmative team, one speaker from the opposition's team, either the leader of opposition or the deputy leader of opposition, is charged for giving a reply speech for 4 minutes and 20 seconds that clarify the debate of the opposition side without bringing forth new arguments. Now, the types of motion, I think this is pretty clear. I think this is pretty important, sorry. And I want everyone to pay attention because a lot of times the structures and also the materials that you have brought from your institutions and debating club may or may not be always fit and suitable to all the types of motion. Sometimes the arguments may be in line and may be a bit coherent to what the motion expects you to argue, but then not necessarily touch the core of the motions as a whole because you don't take a right metrics of the debate or you don't get the right directions of how this debate has to be approached by the motion. Having said that, I will like show you some of this types of the motions. For example, for the value judgment debate, for example, does House believe that we oppose Moon or that Moon has done more? Does House believe that MUN has done more harm than good? So what is the burden of the debate? The burden is to prove whether or not the motion is true. And it doesn't require any follow-up actions or a model. It doesn't require an assessment of the counterfactuals or whether or not that the mechanism is necessarily that functioning. So what the debate has to be about is to only argue whether or not the actions that we want to do in principle would then allow this actions to be justified as a true means to be done or not. Second of all is the policy debate. For example, does House would ban MUN? So the proof is that to prove why the action is necessarily, why is it morally right, and why it brings more benefits than harm. It doesn't then necessarily mean that when you discuss a value judgment debate, you don't have to take any moral analysis or you don't have to take and it brings more harm than good. I think that the idea of bringing more harm than good arguments, as well as the moral justification arguments, are a quite general types of arguments that fit in so many kinds of motion, as far as the debate needs to outweigh whether or not the policy that will be done in this particular action can result in a greater good or in a greater harm. So just because it is noted down as a policy debate that talk about a moral and a bring more harm than benefit, and value judgment does not have this in the slide, that doesn't mean that you just have to shift it too much differently to what we generally know. And third of all is that the actor debate, that this house, for example, as a retired debater will migrate to MUN. So your burden is to prove why the retired debaters' action to migrate to MUN is within the best interest of them, and why it is something that is morally correct to be done by this particular actor. So the debate is not about whether or not migrating to MUN is good or not, but whether or not, as this retiring debater, it is already within the interest of this retiring debater to move to MUN and no longer pursuing debate, and why when they are not pursuing debate, it is something that is morally good and that beneficial thing that this retiring debater has to take. Fourth, the empirical debate, that we regret the prominence of MUN. What's the burden of proof is that to motions the benefit of harm that compare to a counterfactual or alternative conceptions. That is to say, the motion's benefit and the motion's harm is more important in comparisons to what basically you want to propose in this debate. Although in the current metrics, I think that there are already a lot of debate too that uses the counterfactual while they are doing a regret motions. For example, does House regret the narrative of what? Then most likely the debate now operates in a systems that explains what they regret of, and they do present what they prefer in the debate, what they prefer in this particular circumstances when they want to argue. So the benefit of the harms are still what outweigh the best into that debate. So if you have portrayed the harms of the things that you regret of, then the next thing that you might want to do is that why the alternative is so much better in comparisons to what that you regretted. Now the comparative debate, that we prefer a world where debaters can also do MUN, for example. This is to prove why the world is more preferable than the current existing world, not the extraterrestrial world that does not even exist in the comparative of the X and Y of that particular motion. A few additional things to note is that X should do Y. For example, X debaters should join MUN. This is not an actor debate. This is completely different with this house as X debaters should do MUN. With this house believes that X debaters should join MUN. The debate in this motion that this house believes that X debaters should join MUN is about whether, from a neutral third-party perspective, X to do Y is something that is good or not as the person, but as the third-person perspective. So, for instance, the argument how it would be personally beneficial or harmful for X debaters to join MUN do not hold much weight unless a team can give a reason to care about their interests. So that is to say, the debate is not about whether or not it is gonna be that harmful to for X debaters to join, but more likely to argue why X debaters should not join that, because it probably will hinder the debating community, for example, or whether or not it will hinder the progress of the debating community, for example, as opposed to argue why it will harm the debaters first. Because unless it is the interest that both teams have to agree and have to talk about, then that could be something that is presented into the debate. Otherwise, it has to be about what the other perspective wants to see, and most of the time, it's what externally harm that could be done when X does this kind of things to begin with. The second thing is that X that we should do X instead of Y, that we should ban debating instead of MUN. Affirmative must support doing banning debating, and negative must support doing banning MUN. Okay, and neither team can support doing both. So we have witnessed in several debates that the alternative that opposition approach to do in order to win the debate, when they confuse, when they don't really get the motion, is that they drive it crazily and they do it out of the debate. So they don't even defend X or defend Y. They suddenly come with an alternative of Z, which is very, very wrong and shouldn't be done. Same case goes to the affirmative team. Affirmative cannot come and say that we want to support X, but we are somehow actually still okay. We don't really like literally banning Y, for example. That is just not something that you can do in this particular motion. Next is the burdens and the model. Negative teams must support an alternative policy position. These alternative policy positions may be reflected in them choosing to defend the status quo or, advocating for a counter policy that is not inclusive. Okay.
Hi all, please wait for the call adjudicator to continue the briefing. Thank you.
Okay, am I audible and visible?
Yes, bro.
Okay, could you share the screen for me? Anyone? Okay, I hope everyone can see it. Okay, yeah. So burdens and models, right? So first of all, negative teams must support an alternative policy position. This may be reflected in them choosing to defend the status quo or advocating for a counter policy that is not inclusive of the motion. So as the negative team, as the positive team, well, basically you'll be supporting the motion, but then as the negative team, you can have two choices. Either one, you want to say that the status quo is enough, or secondly, you could say that, no, that's not the policy that we want. We would want a counter policy, another policy. So that is the choice of negative teams on your model, what you want to go ahead with, right? And your burden is to prove why then that model would be better or is sufficient towards what proposition has already proposed. Next off, proposition fiat grants affirmative teams the ability to presume their policy will pass or happen. This means they're allowed to presume they have the political capital and resources necessary to carry out the motion. So most likely, but even in some motions, we add this house assuming feasibility. So just to press forward the idea that this is something that like so don't be debating on technicalities by saying, no, this is something that will never happen. Let's just assume that there is a possibility for it to happen. There's political capital and resources necessary. That should not be the spirit of the thing that you're debating about, because then it'll be a fiat, right? Negative team, if choosing to support a counter policy, must ensure that theirs uses the same, if not less, political capital and resources as the affirmative. So this is in negative. Let's say in positive affirmative, they would want a grand policy of like making a one world government or stuff like that. In negative, you have to go at least below or the same as that. Don't go above that, because then that will also run as a fiat. If possible, you would want to prove why with less resources or less political capital or a less grand scheme, you can already achieve something that proposition wants, and probably even better by saying that that grand scheme is too grand, and by your proposal, it's more simple and more achievable. So those are the burdens and models that you could probably bring both in prop and op. Next up, format name. Well, I hope, yeah, you should all remember this for debaters: your room, your team name, your position, and then your name. And then for judges, your room, just write J or judge and then your name. So this is very important so that the committee members can allocate you to your rooms later. Okay. Next up, the tournament flow. So the draws for each round will be released 5 to 10 minutes prior to motion release. So you'll already have your matchups. Then you change your name, right, as soon as possible. Teams should jump into their designated Zoom building call after the draw release. Member of Adjudication Core will check the completion of the team. So yeah, we'll just go back and forth checking if you're in your rooms or not. Teams must revise the app. You already know the guidelines. Right after motion release, prep time will start immediately. So 30 minutes prep time as normal AP. Yeah, teams should conduct their motion veto in their designated room. So this is why you should join your room quickly so you can make your motion preference as soon as possible. And then, yeah, as you know, teams, you should prep on your own, no assistance, no consulting, no technological devices for searching. If, yeah, we would really expect that. We want you to have sportsman-like conduct. So yeah, information might be out there on Google. We will give context slides for motions that are very matter heavy, so don't worry. So as good as possible, try to use things that you know, your basic principles, your basic practical ideas, your thought processes, your mind experiments, you know, that will be a lot better than searching something off Google. And also notice that with context slides, follow the assumption for the debate and not something that you will find on Google. So in a way, please don't search on Google because yeah, it's the same as cheating and it just won't, yeah, it won't do your morale well any good. So if you often bring arguments on morality, then yeah, you would know. Just don't, yeah, search and cheat. Okay, technical issues or connection is lost. If a speaker drops out or becomes inaudible, right? So treat it like a person with extremely loud leaf blowers out the window. So yeah, we'll have to treat it like a technicality. So either you can stop for 30 seconds or check whether the situation can be resolved. Exercise discretion beyond that. If you're in contact with the speaker, you might leave it longer to resolve. So as you can see, we would like 5 minutes at maximum, both for judges and for speakers. So if a judge drops out, wait for 5 minutes or more. You can report to the adjudication core as soon as possible. So for both participant and judge, we would give a maximum of 5 minutes to report the situation, to reconnect and let us know what's happening so we can change things around if needed. So this is on technical issues. Okay, and then motion veto mechanism. Topics are selected by teams rearranging the motions. So example, 1, that debating is fun, that retirement is a myth, that we regret the elitism in debating, rearranging the one we're doing. If you prepare the second motion the most, the third motion the second most, and first motion the least, so arrange it 2, 3, 1. So 2, 3, 1, that means you would want to be debating that retirement is a myth. You do not want to be debating that debating is fun. So there you have it. So please remember this. This is important for motion vetoing and motion preference. Okay, next up we have judge feedback. So here you go. Yeah, so we would like you to give judge feedback basically for the judges. So you know, to ensure quality and to ensure that we allocate the correct judges into the out rounds. So as you can